Daniel 11 is an exciting prophecy. It reveals when the time of the end begins, when the time of trouble starts, and it reveals when probation closes. The key to understanding the prophecy is geography. The actions described in the prophecy are all in relation to the location of Israel. Therefore, the king of the south refers to Egypt because that is the political power south of Israel. The king of the north refers to the various political powers that controlled the area immediately to the north of Israel. The prophecy climaxes in the last 5 verses of Daniel 11. And at the time of the end shall the king of the south push at him, and the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots, and with horsemen, and with many ships. And he shall enter into the countries, and shall overflow and pass over. He shall enter also into the glorious land, and many countries shall be overthrown, but these shall escape out of his hand, even Edom and Moab, and the chief of the children of Ammon. He shall stretch forth his hand also upon the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. But he shall have power over the treasures of gold and of silver, and over all the precious things of Egypt. And the Libyans and the Ethiopians shall be at his steps. But tidings out of the east and out of the north shall trouble him. Therefore he shall go forth with great fury to destroy, and utterly to make away many. And he shall plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas in the glorious holy mountain, yet he shall come to his end, and none shall help him. Scripture, compared with history, establishes the king of the north is the Ottoman Empire. This is proven by the fact that every single particular of the prophecy was fulfilled in history. And at the time of the end shall the king of the south push at him, and the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots, and with horsemen, and with many ships. And he shall enter into the countries, and shall overflow and pass over. The time of the end began in 1798. At this time, Egypt was part of the Ottoman Empire. The Mamluks ruling Egypt had disrupted French trade with Egypt. This was the king of the south pushing at the willful king, who was France. It was not open warfare. Egypt only pushed at the willful king. France and the Ottoman Empire had long been allies. When Egypt pushed at France, the French invaded Egypt, assuming the Ottoman Empire would tolerate their presence there. Great Britain felt threatened by France's invasion of Egypt, knowing the French would like to cut off Great Britain's trade route to India. At the Battle of the Nile on August 1, 1798, France suffered a crippling defeat at the hands of the British Navy. The French fleet was almost entirely annihilated, while the British losses were minimal. This is important to understand because it was this victory by the British that resulted in the King of the North, the Ottoman Empire, coming like a whirlwind against the invading French forces. The French invasion of Egypt had a major and long-lasting impact on the Ottoman state. The British victory at the Battle of the Nile placed Great Britain in a more powerful and more influential position. British diplomacy at Istanbul was now able to steer the empire towards the outright opposition, and on 9 September 1798 the Ottoman Empire declared war on France. Despite his devastating losses in Egypt, Napoleon still pursued his ambitious plans for the Middle East. In late February 1799, French forces left Egypt, marching north to Syria. At Akkar, they encountered the Turks, or the Ottomans. The French laid siege to the city. Just 10 days later, word reached the French of the approach of the mighty Turkish army. It consisted of about 30,000 troops, 12,000 of whom were the fiercest and best trained horsemen in the world. Napoleon had but 8,000 effective men with which to encounter the well-trained army of Europeans and Turks within the walls of Acre, and the numerous host rushing to its rescue. The Ottoman Empire had been roused to battle. They came against the French with the fury of a whirlwind. Turkey has never been known as a seafaring nation, but the prophecy clearly states that many ships would be involved in the King of the North's explosive response. These many ships came from a new alliance formed as a result of the aggressive military action of France. Russia was a long-time enemy of the Ottoman Empire, but she allied with the Turks to fight Napoleon. As unusual as it seems, Russia, the avowed enemy of Turkey, united with them in defense against Napoleon. The Russian fleet was sent with a small Turkish fleet to the harbor of St. John d'Acre, and they were joined there by 2 British squadrons. The total number of ships reached more than 30. The word here, translated countries, has a broader meaning than simply nations. It also refers to fields or a wilderness. It conveys the idea of a region. The King of the North, or the Ottoman Empire, entered many regions it had previously conquered. It overflowed them and passed through them as it responded to the threat of the willful king, France. He shall also enter into the glorious land, and many countries shall be overthrown. But these shall escape out of his hand, even Edom and Moab, and the chief of the children of Ammon. The now awakened Turks, the King of the North, chased the French southward. The glorious land refers to Palestine. The French were driven out of Syria, clear down through Palestine and back into Egypt. From there, the French returned to Europe. In this phrase, countries is a supplied word. The original Hebrew simply states, "Many shall be overthrown." With the aid of the British, the King of the North, the Turks, again brought Egypt under its control. These military actions were very costly in terms of loss of human life. When the French were driven back into Egypt, they had lost over 3,000 men due to death, the plague, or injury. At the First Battle of Abukir in 1799, French forces won the victory in Egypt. However, it cost the lives of an additional 1,000 French soldiers. The cost to the Ottomans was even higher. An estimated 8,000 Turkish troops were killed. Just as foretold, many were overthrown when the King of the North came like a whirlwind against the willful king, France. These lands lay predominantly east of the Jordan River. The King of the North focused his attention where French forces were located. This was west of the Jordan. Therefore, all the lands east of the Jordan escaped out of his hand in the drive south. He shall stretch forth his hand also upon the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. The Ottoman Empire was ruthless in bringing under control those areas it had previously conquered. The Ottomans tortured and killed any French soldiers they found, wounded or not. They likewise killed anyone suspected of sympathizing with the French, and it was in this that the land of Egypt did not escape. But he shall have power over the treasures of gold and of silver, and over all the precious things of Egypt, and the Libyans and the Ethiopians shall be at his steps. Muhammad Ali was sent to Egypt by the Ottomans in their fight to drive out the French. Once in power, Muhammad Ali executed one of the greatest land grabs in history. He confiscated the feudal farms of the Mamluk grandees and stripped Cairo's religious institutions of their 600,000 prime acres of landholdings, thus decapitating Cairo's medieval order, and Egypt was now the viceroy's private plantation. Muhammad Ali may be credited with establishing the modern Egyptian state, but it was not done peaceably. he levied ruinously high taxes on the populace, impoverishing them. Ali also sent tribute to the Ottoman Sultan. Thus, the treasures of gold and of silver, along with all the precious things of Egypt, were made available to the King of the North. The northern coast of Africa was brought under the control of the Ottoman Empire early on. It remained largely independent until 1832. The word translated in the King James Bible comes from the word Cushite, which was translated into Latin as. This area anciently referred to the land bordering on the south of Egypt. The Libyans and the Ethiopians were perfectly described when said to be at the steps of the King of the North. But tidings out of the east and out of the north shall trouble him. Therefore he shall go forth with great fury to destroy, and utterly to make away many. The King of the North is inarguably the Ottoman Empire. Therefore, tidings out of the east and out of the north would be news coming from the east and north of the Ottoman Empire, not the east and north of Palestine. One of the unexpected results of France's invasion of Egypt was the alliance of the Ottoman Empire with her northern neighbour, Russia. The two had been at war for centuries. The Russo-Turkish wars spanned 5 centuries and are among the longest-lasting disputes in the history of Europe. During these conflicts, the Ottoman Empire steadily lost land to the Russian Empire. Persia lay east of the Ottoman Empire. In the early 1800s, Persia and Russia were involved in 2 wars. Persia lost the war and land to Russia. The Russian victories freed the peoples of Transcaucasia from the yoke of the Persian feudal lords, and these peoples actively supported the Russian forces during the wars. Russia, by annexing land from Persia, partially encircled the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire was pressured from both the north and the east. This was the news out of the north and the east that troubled the King of the North. The vast majority of Ottomans were Muslim, while the Russians were Christian. This created religious tensions. When the Tsar ordered the Muslims expelled from the North Caucasus, it resulted in a genocide that cost the lives of 1.5 million Muslims. Any survivors fled southward to the Ottoman Empire. Vengeance came less than 60 years later. During and directly following World War I, the Turks were responsible for the Armenian genocide, the Greek genocide, and the Assyrian genocide, in which upwards of 3 million Christians lost their lives due to the suspicion that, as Christians, they were sympathetic to Russia. These tragedies can be directly traced back to the King of the South pushing at the willful king, France, and the overwhelming reaction of the King of the North in response to the French invasion. And he shall plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas in the glorious holy mountain, yet he shall come to his end, and none shall help him. A number of Bible scholars in the 19th century suggested the Ottoman Empire was the King of the North. As the King of the North, they predicted the Ottoman Empire would transfer its headquarters to Jerusalem. When the Ottoman Empire dissolved following World War I without this ever happening, many assumed their interpretation was incorrect. This assumption, however, is based on a misunderstanding of the word tabernacles. When correctly understood, it is clearly seen that the King of the North is the Ottoman Empire, and he did plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas in the glorious holy mountain. In other words, the Ottoman Sultan established his political presence between the Jordan River on the east and the Mediterranean Sea on the west. The word tabernacle comes from a Hebrew word meaning a tent or covering. The children of Israel tabernacled in the wilderness. It is the same word used repeatedly to describe both the tent of meeting and the sanctuary. A tabernacle is a temporary dwelling place. Here, a record of history again confirms the accuracy of prophetic utterance. Beginning in the late 1890s, agitation grew for the establishment of a permanent homeland for the Jews with Jerusalem as the capital. The problem was, Palestine was still under the control of the Ottoman Empire. Abdul Hamid II, Sultan of the Ottoman Empire and Caliph of the Ottoman Caliphate, saw the increased interest foreign powers had in territories belonging to him. He responded in a way that perfectly fulfills the prophecy. Hamid sent officials from his own palace to govern the province around Jerusalem. He wanted officials there to keep him informed of any attempts by foreign governments to seize the area. The Sultan's concerns were well founded. For the next 2 decades, agitation for a Jewish homeland increased. Finally, in 1922, the League of Nations passed the British Mandate for Palestine. This mandate took Palestine from Turkey and unilaterally gave it over to British control. The Sultan did not need to move his entire government to Jerusalem in order to fulfill Daniel 11 verse 45. The prophecy was fulfilled when he deliberately moved part of his government to Jerusalem to meet the growing threat of Zionist expansionism. The mighty Ottoman Empire, feared scourge of the Crusaders, came to its end, not with a bang, but withering away into nothingness. The Ottoman Empire was not conquered by some other nation, it came to its end internally. Mustafa Kemal, a Turkish military officer, gave the Ottoman Empire a deadly wound from which it has never, and from which it will never, recover. Kemal founded the modern Republic of Turkey. He abolished both the Ottoman Sultanate and the Islamic Caliphate. Kemal ensured that the new government would remain secular by deliberately severing Turkish law from Islamic Sharia law, and he made this separation a part of the Turkish constitution. Kemal made it impossible for the Ottoman Empire and the Caliphate to ever be revived. The King of the North had come to his end and none helped him. Turkey has fulfilled its destined role in prophecy. There is nothing more to be fulfilled in the prophecy of Daniel 11. Anything more that occurs in Turkey falls within the parameters of the time of trouble that began in 1922 when the King of the North came to his end with no one to help him. The entire build-up of Daniel 11 was for one purpose and one purpose only: to identify when probation will close. This is a very solemn realization. The angel told Daniel, "And at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince which standeth for the children of thy people. And there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time. And at that time thy people shall be delivered, every one that shall be found written in the book." This is the time in which we are now living since 1922. Probation will be closing soon. There is but a single event standing between today and that solemn event: the sounding of the trumpets. The purpose of the trumpets is to awaken souls, because what comes after the close of probation, the last 7 plagues, will be so bad that if Yahuwah did not preserve his children through it, there would be no life left. Infinite mercy wants every soul awake, aware, and capable of making intelligent decisions. The trumpets will draw the attention of every person living on the face of the earth to the truths they need to know to get ready for the close of probation and the second coming. Now, in these closing moments, make a full surrender to Yahuwah. Search your heart. Lay aside every impediment and, with full assurance of faith, grasp the promised salvation. The Father's hand is reaching out, longing to grasp yours and pull you to safety. Won't you reach out to the best friend you will ever have?